Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on longevity. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Edward, Professor David Smith, Professor Rob, and Mr. Jason. First, I would like to give chance Professor Edward.
Thanks a lot. This is one of my favorite topics because if we're not alive, we can't discuss anything, can we? So longevity is kind of an important issue. I mean, in a sense, really, life is the most important issue. It's the most important value. There is no such thing as a value without us being alive. And for your listeners in the Asia Pacific area, what I want to suggest is this, and we've had this topic on shows before. I want you to raise your consciousness about what is possible for we human beings. Throughout human history, we've all just kind of assumed that we're going to die. Everyone, it's a 100% record so far that everyone is going to die, and that no one has really lived past, I think it's 120, 122, something of that sort. We seem to be biologically programmed to pass away at some point. But in the last 2 or 3 decades, we've had a revolution that's going to be even more profound than the Industrial Revolution that's created our incredible society. A revolution in understanding exactly what aging is. For example, one of the great pioneers is Bill Andrews. I was on a call with him yesterday. We're working on some reforms right now. He did a lot of the basic research on telomeres. What telomeres are is on your chromosomes. Every time your cell reproduces, the telomeres are these little things on the end of your chromosomes that get shorter and shorter and shorter. When they disappear after about 50 divisions of your cells don't divide anymore, and you sort of wrinkle up and eventually die. There are other great researchers, Aubrey de Grey, who is speaking, since we're talking about longevity speakers, he's going to be speaking at Freedom Fest, where I'm a sponsor there in a couple of weeks. And I want to recommend to your listeners, especially Aubrey's book, or look up the so-called SENS strategy. What that means is this. Aging is an incredibly complex process with all sorts of interacting biological issues. And what Aubrey has done, and some others have done as well, is to break down the process of aging into its constituent parts. For example, mitochondrial mutations. Every single cell has a little thing called mitochondria, and basically it's the power center of each cell, and it converts materials into energy. And over time, mutations happen, and there's a whole process that basically undermines that. I just mentioned telomeres, that over time, the telomeres disappear on your chromosomes, and so your cells don't reproduce. There's a thing called a zombie cell. What happens is when a cell dies, usually they just kind of dissipate. But what happens is some cells just kind of stay there as a zombie cell, with toxic material still going out, infecting cells around it. And what Aubrey does in his book, and you can read this in other places as well, I'll give you the citations, is he breaks down those processes into 7 categories. And I just hold it up here, but you guys can check it out in the book itself, or go online and look up Aubrey de Grey and SENS. He has this thing called a SENS strategy. Strategies for engineering negligible senescence. And what that means is, what he suggests, and what a lot of others are working on now, is to take each of these processes that constitute aging and say, what can we do for telomere shortening? And that's one of the things that Bill Andrews is working on. What can we do for the mitochondrial decay or mutations, and well, the effects of the mutations, I should say? What specific things can we do to address each of these processes or issues that concern aging? So this is now a scientific process. This isn't just, well, we hope we can live longer. I want to suggest to your listeners the best overall book, if you sort of want a good summary of what's going on, fairly recent, I want to highly suggest The Science and Technology of Growing Young by Sergey Young. Very easy to remember the title of the book and the name of the author. It's Growing Young by Young. This is a very good overview of what's going on in the longevity community. And then the final thing I'll mention, this is where you folks in the Asian Pacific area can consider, is that if you're interested in this topic, we really need talented people. And so if you're interested in this, your education and your talent is very important. And eventually what you're going to have to do is look at the processes, the policies that right now, frankly, for example, prohibit our Food and Drug Administration from even considering treatments that, for example, would deal with telomere shortening, because they don't consider aging to be a disease. So if you go to the Food and Drug Administration in this country, and more, this is starting to happen in the Asian countries. The Asian countries are copying some of the bad habits of the West, I'm afraid to say, and basically saying, well, does this proposed treatment cure cancer? Well, no. Does it cure Alzheimer's? Well, no. Does it cure this? Well, no. Does it cure that? What it does is it deals with underlying problems that eventually cause or are associated with cancer and all these other problems in older age. So in other words, you're getting what these treatments would do is basically get rid of or mitigate some of the processes that lead to most of the cancers are in old age. Most of these problems are in old age. And so you're going to have to look at reforms that allow for these kinds of treatments. And I've done a lot of work. In fact, that was what I was doing yesterday, is working with some of these folks, and I've worked on legislation to change our processes of somebody needs to mute themselves there. Noise here in the background. Anyway, that's going to be very important in terms of reforms, because there's a lot of great research being done, but it can't be they can't be approved for treatments by patients because of a very antiquated system that we have in this country and in a lot of other countries. I've been working on what's a good way to reform. I'll make one final comment, and I sort of have to jump off in a few minutes here, that I made earlier. If you're interested in longevity, there's a lot of things you can do yourself. These are obvious things. In other words, exercise, have a good diet, don't smoke cigarettes, okay? So if you really care about your own health and you want to live long and healthy, these are important things that you can take into take into account and are under your own control. So anyway, that's kind of my opening remark. I have to jump off in a few minutes here. And hopefully at some point, if you want to do a show on what policy changes are needed to allow these treatments to be researched and to get funding, because that's one of the problems, is that if the FDA says we can't even look at this, then innovators go to funders and they say, I'm sorry, but we can't do anything because the FDA isn't going to even look at it, much less approve this if it's successful. So that might be a topic for a future show. It's something that I'm literally working on at this moment. So anyway, thank you again for a great topic, and all of you talented folks who are listening to this show, please contact me if you want more information and check out these really cool books.
Thank you, Professor Edward. Professor David Smith.
Edward does a great job on introducing these, and he's right. Longevity is a great topic because we're all here to participate in it, and so are your viewers. Longevity, though, it has so many different definitions. It's kind of fun to go through them. Biologists typically look at longevity as the average lifespan expected under ideal conditions. And, there's a lot of medical research going on about what is the right amount and type of exercise to get, what's the best diet to eat to maximize longevity, and whether there are prescription drugs, supplements, or others that can help improve your longevity. That marketplace has grown 1,000% in the last 5 years. And for the most part, lifespans have increased pretty dramatically over the last century or so. And that's due in large part to advances in medicine uh, that have eliminated many deadly infectious diseases. Um, Today, in the United States, the average lifespan is about 80 years. And in some countries, the lifespan is even much longer. If I go and look at some of the countries like Hong Kong, Japan, Switzerland, Singapore, Spain, Italy, Australia, they have some of the largest longest life expectancies today. And I find that very interesting because traditionally their stress levels tend to be more managed and controlled. Uh, what are the things that can help look at the factors to increase your longevity? You know, it's based on many factors, but the two primary ones are genetics and lifestyle choices. And Edwards mentioned some of the lifestyle choices that are in there. But about 30% of the variations in human life expectancy are based to genetics. And uh, Edward mentioned the telomeres, but there's others as well that you begin to see that impact life expectancy as well, particularly some of the proteins that are in the blood, which impact the oxidation of DNA damage. The lifestyle, though, are interesting things that we control. You know, it's diet, it's many of the other elements he mentioned, not smoking, not being obese, and all of those come into play. Um, and we need to begin to look at those. You know, there's different ways to set yourself up with the things you can do, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But in my view, longevity is such a great topic because there's so much research being done in longevity today. And it's in so many different disciplines that it's a complex research area to deal with a complex body and the conditions that go into it. So, Sharif, those are my opening remarks. And Sharif, you're muted.
Professor Rob.
Well, longevity is, as others have pointed out, is an interesting topic. The question is really how we are going to extend the lives of people on this planet, and one of the most effective ways, at least in the near term, is probably going to be the move to human digital twins and digital immortality. That's undoubtedly how we're going to reach it. The physical limitations to extend the human lifespan past, say, 120 years are fairly severe, and seems to be we may have to do those modifications early in the gestation cycle and prior to birth to really reform how we age and how long we're going to live as a race, and then fundamentally answer the question: if we do that, are we still human, and do we want to be? However, with digital immortality, the concept of creating a human digital twin, and we actually have companies out there that are selling technology to do this right now, will allow, as that technology advances, to create a near immortal duplicate of the way you are now. And now, one of the interesting things also about immortality is if you look at the cellular replacement rate in the human body, we replace virtually all our living cells about every decade, which means we are not the person we were 10 years ago or the person we were 10 years before that. We have a fiction of continuous life, but we are being born and dying all the time as our cellular structure dies off and is replaced to a point where, as I mentioned, every decade we are effectively a new person. And even if we go from our mental state, the person we are when we're 5 is very different than the person we are at 15, is very different than the person we are at 25, 35, and so on, up to a point where we reach a relatively stable state fairly late in life. We're up until our 50s and 60s. We're still changing a great deal, both physically and mentally. So the other part is what phase of ourselves would we want to extend? Would we want to extend probably would want to extend the 5-year-old, maybe not the 15-year-old, might want to extend the 25-year-old, but if our brain is still not fully formed, maybe that's not the way to extend it. Maybe we want to extend our life or freeze our aging at 30 or 40 or probably not 50 or 60. So that's but then there are advantages to things later in life, and then of course we have other methods to extend life. What if we begin replacing the components of our bodies that have ceased their ability to refresh themselves and continue on life that way? The brain may be able to survive quite a bit longer than other parts of the body, which have predetermined failure rates. Your heart, liver, intestines, the other parts of your body may fail at a higher rate than your brain. And of course, we also know that our brain and our mind are not the same thing. So if we do go through and wholesale replace large portions of our body and not the brain, we may still have changed ourselves beyond what otherwise we would have considered a consistent person. So the underlying concept of how we would extend life, when we would extend life, what part of our life we would extend, because I'm pretty sure none of us would want to live as a 95-year-old for a couple centuries. On the other hand, probably none of us would want to live as a 5-year-old for a couple centuries either. So the methodology to extend physical life becomes problematic. And as we get to things like space travel, it becomes critical because the distance in time and space makes human travel into outer space, unless you're talking about some kind of a generational ship, at least right now, unattainable. Because things like suspended animation, at least we have not figured out how to do that without doing massive cellular damage, which also takes us right back to this idea of digital immortality. Digital immortality, we in theory will be able to do effectively within the next 2 decades, and create a version of ourselves that won't age, that will remain consistent, that will only be altered by the influx of new information that might alter its thinking process. But from a physical standpoint, the digital immortal would remain physically unchanged, except for the changes that might happen in the platforms in which it resides. If you have a digital immortal and you take it from a current generation computer and you put it into a future quantum computer, would that not change fundamentally how that digital immortal was? Would it be the same thing? So this idea of life extension is fascinating, because I don't know how we get there. And I don't know if we even want to. If we just take simple math and we were to say take and double the life expectancy of every person on Earth, we would rapidly run out of resources and live in a dystopian future that would offset that life extension rather quickly, with resulting wars and fights over resources. And clearly, if we were to stop death at any given point in time, we would again be overwhelmed if we didn't stop or at least substantially reduce births, we would again substantially overwhelm the planet in a reasonably short period of time in terms of resources, since a number of countries are already resource constrained right now, and this would put even more stress on those resources. So thinking through not only the medical aspects of change that we would need to make, but the social changes that would need to also occur, so we didn't create a whole bunch of global problems, would be problematic. And we do have a lot of money going into extending life. Elon Musk is funding his research efforts pretty heavily. Jeff Bezos is active as well, funding this. I think the richer you are, the longer you want to live, particularly because you want to live forever, being that rich and very powerful person. And nobody really wants to get old and infirm. But thinking through how we're going to do this, how we're going to do it so it's equitable, how we're going to do it so we don't disrupt the geopolitical system beyond repair. Though some could point out that geopolitical system is pretty bad shape as right now, and how we are going to begin to meld the new digital immortals we're going to be creating over these next couple decades with their human counterparts that continue to exist in the real world. It's going to be fascinating and interesting. I should point out that human digital twins, as they're being created, would age along with their human host until that human host died, in which case they would then become frozen, which would provide interesting ways to talk about relatives that would otherwise be long past, or get access to thinking that might only occur in the geniuses that have already passed on at some future date. So the capabilities are amazing, but the problems would be just as troubling. So thinking through all aspects of this is going to keep a lot of us involved for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Mr. Jason, you want to share any presentation?
Sure, absolutely. I'll just jump in. I'll share my screen in a minute. That just not really a presentation, just a short thing I just thought of. Yeah, so longevity. I mean, I think a lot of good points were kind of already effectively laid out, and I think just to echo some of the comments, I think what Edward said, about Bill Andrews and Aubrey de Grey and the telomere theory and the hallmarks are all very important. I think the theory that Aubrey has, I think, is definitely relevant in the space, because what he sort of says is that really aging is damage and it can be repaired. And that's where, when you think about like even David Sinclair, when he started in this space, he thought we could maybe slow down aging a little bit. There it is. That's David Sinclair's book that Edward is holding up there. He thought that, you could maybe slow down the process, but more recently, over the past few years, he's now saying that we can actually reverse it. And, and he's obviously one of the top experts in the space, and he's saying that this is a reversible process. It's not necessarily something that goes in a straight line. It's much more malleable than we thought. And then we had Morgan Levine's work that came out just recently. She's one of the leaders at Altos Labs and has extensive experience in the space, really laying out, more expanding on these bioaging clocks, these biological aging clocks. And, what we now know is that you can actually manipulate these clocks through various therapies, through various processes. Now, the tricky part is you could, maybe be hacking the clock on accident. You could measure something, say, okay, now I've changed the lifestyle, or I've done a therapy. Now I measure it again, and okay, I've reversed my aging. But really, that's just one clock, and we don't even know if that clock correlates to a disease state or a healthy state yet. So there's still a lot of pieces to the puzzle to be laid out. But I think that, in the end, it may come down to a multifaceted approach, but there may be a single important driver. Like Bill Andrews would definitely think, that's the telomeres. And so I do wonder if, 100 years down the road, if we come back and we do have that E equals MC squared equation that really lays out the fundamental main driver of aging. Now, it's obviously speculation. We don't know for sure how that's going to pan out. A few comments on, Rob, I thought the comments you made were very relevant and important too. I think digital twins, those are going to be interesting. I think that, we are going to have these twins. It's going to raise a lot of morality issues. It's going to raise a lot of thought, conceptual issues. I think they're going to be interesting. We're not quite there yet, but I do agree. There's a lot of companies really trying to build these in silico models that can then simulate biology in machines to then expedite these various endeavors like drug development or different things. But I think really the pace of change as we all know, is increasing. So, I think we're going to be blown away these next 10 years, because right now we're seeing still just kind of we're seeing this momentum, right? If we think about 10 years ago, the researchers, they didn't even think aging was reversible. They didn't think there was anything you could do about it. Now, a lot of the top experts are really saying that it is. And because of that, along with several other catalysts, we're now seeing massive capital go into the space. I'd say between 2019 and 2022, we saw over $52 billion go into longevity. And now we have well over 20 to 50,000 companies all around the globe, all working on different aspects of biotech, and a lot of them related directly to aging and longevity. And then we're seeing these small subgroups of biohackers around the world now, releasing information, doing experiments on themselves, all kinds of people, because we know that to do an experiment and to actually show something works for longevity is very, very difficult. So, you can't really do it on a human, because, that human has to die in order for those results to come out. So we will have long-term longevity studies for humans, but right now we've primarily got them for animals. So we can make some jump or some inference from, a rat study. You always hear about these rat studies. For example, in Dr. Sinclair's lab, he runs a study, gives them some NMN, and then, says, okay, NMN is working, the rats are running and they're living longer, and maybe that'll work in humans. So we're still kind of guessing, but we can run experiments on ourselves, and we can, determine things, if it works or if it doesn't, in a more quantifiable way now, where we can actually test our blood. We can, maybe notice performance, but still it's not perfect. But really, I think to give us all kind of hope is that the space is increasing so quickly now. You're seeing young people from all over the world. You're seeing decentralized autonomous organizations in really like so many different fields. A lot of them attempting to directly impact longevity, and then you're seeing more sophisticated AIs come out. Just recently with the Google situation with their employees, claiming that it's sentient, which it's probably not. It's probably not a sentient or conscious machine yet, but it really shows that when someone like Ray Kurzweil predicted in 2029 that we will have AGIs, it really looks like he may end up being correct, especially since there's more and more incentives across the board. I'll quickly share my screen. It ties into a little bit of let me see here. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, so can you see that okay, Sharif?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to lay out, we were talking about, a little bit about like cell turnover. I know Rob was kind of alluding to, and really like aging in general at a high level, which is a very, it's a convoluted topic because it's hard to even define. I've talked to a lot of people about aging, and you quickly realize that it's an obscure topic, and no one can even really articulate clearly the definition on some level. But there's approximate definitions, and so this right here, this is actually a slide this guy Michael Fossil laid out that I just thought was phenomenal. On the left here, you have these like upstream things that occur to people, right? For example, like stress or having an abnormal microbiome. So, if your microbiome, which there's microbiomes all over your body, right? You have microbiomes on your head, in your mouth, in your stomach, and these are going to affect the way you age and the way your health is on many levels. And this is sort of a new area of research, but out of all the, there's 9 hallmarks of aging, but I think the microbiome is sort of this undervalued area, because really we have so many of these microorganisms in our body and all over us. So I think it's really a huge one. But all these, you could be familiar with toxins or trauma or just chronological age. So that's kind of going into this, I would call it a black box, but really, I mean, it's cell aging. So the main thing here is like this molecular turnover slowing down. So I want to dig deeper into that point, but the downstream effects, these are all the things that are sort of the after effects of aging. As an example, this elevated AGE product. So this is when essentially like your protein cells and your fat cells and or really like your protein cells and your sugar cells run into each other. So like you start eating a lot of sugar, then they run into each other, they create these products, and it just messes things up because in certain situations the biology can't break these bonds. So I'll give the example of your skin, right? Once someone's old, now I believe that we are going to rejuvenate skin. They're going to see old skin, that's going to go to young. But it's a very challenging problem. We haven't quite solved this issue yet, or we would see someone, like that. There's this bond that occurs in your biology, and it's really interrelated to it's called the extracellular matrix, and it's just very hard to break that bond. So, but we'll figure it out, and we'll be able to solve that problem. But any of these things, these are all going to be the effects that are happening as you age. Lipofuscin accumulation, this happens in your skin, your brain, and your muscles as well. So you can think of within the cell. I think of like a bedroom that has a pile of laundry, and that pile just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually, like you can't even get in and out of the room. So it's definitely an issue because the cells start to accumulate all this junk, and their operations start going downhill. It's like if you have a factory and there's clutter all over, right? And so that happens as you age, and unfortunately, it's very difficult to remove that junk. You really need to bring in, a maid or a garbage facility, or just get some of that stuff out. So all these things, though, these are all areas where there's probably companies across all these boxes that are attempting to target this as an aging source, and on the upstream effect as well. How do we it's all about decreasing the upstream effects like trauma, and also in turn also decreasing the effect, like the cause. You want to decrease the cause, you also want to decrease the effect. And tied into the turnover, I just want to show this equation real quick. This is again the same guy laid this out, and I just thought it was just phenomenal that the way he kind of defined this. But when you think about young cells and young people, 50% turnover. So your cells are just circulating through over and over with very little damage. But as you get old, the turnover goes down. And obviously there's going to be variation across different cell types. So, your brain cells versus your skin cells versus your liver cells, these are all going to have different turnover rates and different damage rates. But this gives you a little bit of an approximation of really what's happening. Like when you got a 90-year-old, their turnover is so low and their damage is so high that really the body can't adapt and heal and repair all that damage quick enough. So what happens is the DNA starts accumulating damage, and the repair mechanisms can't react quick enough because it's almost like a multitasking machine, right? If you got 50 things to do and you only got a little capacity, you just can't do them all. So you got to try to allocate your resources accordingly. And unfortunately, that machine starts breaking down. It starts breaking down at an accelerated pace. So we look at, like, from a longevity standpoint, about every 8 years, you see this like doubling effect of your chance of death, right? So if you're 30, you got a really low probability. When it starts going up over time, once you hit about 65, you're at about a 1% chance of dying for that year. So really, it becomes difficult, which you might think, oh, well, that's 8 years, right? So 1% to 2%, okay, now you're in your 70s. But when you think about this doubling effect, that doubling effect happened, it's exponential. So the probability of death, kind of skyrockets when you get into your 80s, 90s, and 100s. And when you're well into your hundreds, it's basically a coin flip. Like every year, you got about a 50% chance of dying. So it's it's not probably not a good mindset. And so I think the societal shift in perception needs to happen. Like we think that, oh, like it's fine, like those people, like they lived a good life, but really think about it, it's actually not that great, because they have all these experiences, they have a ton of knowledge, and they want to live. Like a lot of them, the mass majority, if you're 100, you're still trying to make it to 101. So I'd say we definitely need even more people and even more capital, because you think about the number of deaths, right? People would think, oh, well, like it's the wars, or it's this issue, or it's that issue that are killing people or immoral. But when you think about it, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, over 100,000 people dying every day from aging, or age-related diseases. But aging is sort of the main driver. So it just doesn't really make sense to be like thinking that putting a lot of capital and time and discussions into other things, assuming that those are the things that are going to save lives, when really, like, it's just not. The numbers just don't even compare. So it's like 100,000 people per day. So COVID, I mean, that was like nothing compared to this. Now COVID is effectively on some level an age-related disease, because your probability of dying from it when you're older is much, much higher. So it definitely is interrelated there. But really, it's every disease. Like you give it to a young person, they have a high chance of survival. You give it to an old person, they have a low chance of survival. So if we can readapt and reverse that cellular machinery, we're going to see a drastically different outcome. Anyway, I know it's a lot of intro remarks, but I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jason, for your excellent presentation. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. Longevity is a nuanced subject because it raises questions like, if people are to live longer, does that mean people will retire at 80 or 90 years old if lifespans go up to 130 years? Or will retirement ages stay more or less the same, meaning that people's retirements will be longer if they retire at 65 but still live up to, for example, an average of 130 again? There are gradations, again. Extending lifespans to 130 years is one thing, but extending that to 300, 400, 500 is a different level entirely, as is people living for millennia. We can scarcely imagine what life will be like for such post-humans by then, I imagine. The nature of work, resources, having a family, life meaning, life quality. And that's another thing, family. Is there enough room in the universe for extremely long-living post-humans and their children, who will also live up to such ages or even surpass the previous generation's ages? Plus, within transhumanism and futurism, there's longevity and the more radical immortalism. So certainly not all longevity researchers and advocates are immortalists. So is there enough room in the universe for these different groups when humanity gets to a point where it will splinter into what will become eventually drastically different subspecies of human and post-human? Will immortalists allow themselves to have children? Some people argue that having children is a kind of immortality in itself. And Rob made an important point about what age does a person want to be extended as. Another complication will be, say, a 70-year-old, for example, a 70-year-old person who doesn't want to die. They want to extend their lifespan, but not as a 70-year-old. So this topic overlaps with the anti-aging area. But then the choice has to be made again. What young age would they wish to be? But recently, the definition of young has started to encompass a greater window of ages. A lot of people today think that 60 years old is young these days. Decades and centuries ago, less so, obviously. But now a lot of 60-year-olds are considered young, youthful. You can be a happy and healthy 60-year-old with the added wisdom and useful life experience that comes with living to such ages. So, would a person who is 1,000 years old be 10 times as wise as a 100-year-old? Furthermore, as people have pointed out already, there is already a diversity of different areas, biogerontology and SENS, like with Aubrey de Grey, cryonics, like with Alcor, mind uploading, a la Ray Kurzweil, going into space and time travel as well. I don't think we have a winner just yet. Which one is going to get the Holy Grail or the Fountain of Youth first? And will there still be room for the other areas to develop if one research avenue gets there first? If Aubrey de Grey gets to where he wants to be and his projects are a complete success, will something like cryonics become obsolete? Maybe all of them will still be in demand depending on people's differing preferences, I suppose. Morally and ethically, it's interesting, and it shines a light on other issues such as euthanasia. I noticed that a lot of life extensionists are quite evangelical about it, which is fine. It's good to be passionate, but they call people not on board with life extension as the deathists, which is used pejoratively. So something like euthanasia is off the table for a lot of them, and that's euthanasia, of course, is still a controversial topic. I've always wondered why animals who are in extreme pain and suffering are allowed to die to escape that, but humans are not, where loved ones risk prosecution and imprisonment for putting their loved ones out of their misery. So I definitely think we need to rethink and reevaluate such laws before going on to then radically extend lifespans. We don't want to doom people who are centuries old to centuries worth of suffering. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Professor Mamo. Professor Mamo, can you hear me? Professor Mamo? I'm sorry about that. Yes, I'm sorry about that. Professor David Smith, what's the concluding remarks for today's session and how we can improve more in this longevity research?
For Sharif, I think the research, as has been summarized by most of us, is in so many different areas. There is medical research, there's pure scientific research, there's lifestyle research. There's also research that needs to be done. What are the policies that can help support longevity? What are the conditions that governments can influence, particularly around pollution and other elements like that, which are affecting us today? So a lot of places where activity can be placed, but there's a lot of things that we as individuals can do as well. You've heard multiple of us say, you want to be able to keep moving and do the things that can help yourself by exercise. I've had doctors tell me don't sit in a chair all day and begin to move. I tried a standing desk, and that wasn't quite my thing yet. But I've also had a couple of friends who have converted treadmills into desks, and they'll do their Zoom calls and things while they're walking on the treadmill, which I think I'm going to try, because to me, that's one of the ways to help get the whole concept of move, move, move as being a way to look at longevity and the exercise there. One of the other things as you look at yourself is I've had in a bunch of the research I've seen lately, it says allow yourself to be hungry. And there's a lot of very recent research that fasting can help you turn on some of the pathways that can help with increased longevity, as well as manage your weight. Get enough sleep. Stress. The byline I hear a lot of is have a calm mental attitude. And I think that's great, but I can tell you, if you want to have a calm mental attitude, you really don't want to be flying today, because any airport and any flight is nothing but pure stress today. So but it's to keep calm and manage that risk and manage that stress. Look at what you're eating. We've been told the sayings we had growing up about eat your vegetables. Well, now some of the science says that the best diet for increasing lifespan is to eat more vegetables as you go forward. And you see that, and there's a recent study in Cell Metabolism that has shown that people who eat a large amount of vegetables increase their life expectancy. Get enough sleep. Most of us do not do that. One of them that kind of surprised me, but makes sense as you think about it, is cultivate friendships, cultivate personal relationships. Maybe it's because it decreases stress or risky behaviors or others, but the University of Exeter Medical School in England found that volunteers that had a large group of personal friends had a 22% reduction in mortality. As we've said many times, don't smoke, don't drink to excess. Those are things that can help you with your longevity. I love the fact that longevity has an answer that says if we don't practice what helps us live longer, we won't. And that's a bad outcome. And to me, you have to do that. But there is so much research today happening in all these different disciplines that can support longevity and support the elements that are good. I think also one of the things that has helped me with not necessarily my physical longevity, but my mental longevity is to be exposed to a lot of different cultures. I know I love traveling and seeing the different cultures and participating in those and taking some of the best practices I see in other cultures, in other countries back with me and implementing those in my daily life. And those are the things that will extend longevity. Those are things that will help us mentally be able to cope as we age. I almost want to remind you again, as we talk about this as we have in the past, most people don't get old. They just get older. And I think that's part of the mental mindset that can help you when you look at longevity, is we're just aging and we're getting older, but that we're not getting old. And that old enneagram, that you're only as old as you feel. I believe, as I'm looking at the recent research, there is actually a lot of truth in that as well. And I think we see that over time as well. But great topic, Sharif. There's a lot of things. And as the world shrinks because of digitalization and connectivity, the research on this can be done anywhere. And as Rob talked about earlier, the growth of digital twins are going to let us accelerate our research on how to increase longevity, because it's easier doing some of this research on a digital twin than on a live human being. So that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today?
I mentioned earlier the most sure way to extend life indefinitely is probably going to be digitally for now. And the underlying question then is when do you want to what part of your life do you want to extend? And the way you can address that is if you exercise well, moderate your diet, and start early. The signs of aging are put off, and that allows you to extend the period of your life where you are mobile, you are relatively healthy, into a longer period of time. Though I've seen people argue that if you give up all those vices, you're not eating McDonald's anymore, you're not drinking alcohol, maybe your life only seems like it's a lot longer, may not actually be longer, which is one of the running jokes. But the fact is, if you take care of your body early in life, when you think you are immortal, then your life will undoubtedly be longer and happier, unless you're hit by a bus, which is, of course, one of the sad outcomes of people that often have incredibly healthy lives, only to end in an accident. But the fact is that even in those extreme cases, if you maintain a very healthy lifestyle, there's a better chance you're going to survive a catastrophic event as well, because your body just much more able to deal with trauma. So there is a very good reason to do that. I've had several people that I've known throughout my life that have lived far healthier lifestyles than I am, and older, and are now older than I am, and arguably healthier than I am as well. For that, so the sacrifices they made early on in their life paid huge dividends later on in their life because they're just in far better shape. Do be aware that you can overdo anything. Too much of anything is not necessarily a good thing. Vitamins, particularly massive amounts of vitamins, can do a tremendous amount of harm. So do recognize that a lot of the stuff out there that professes to extend your life may not only not extend your life, it may create other kinds of health problems going forward because you were overdosing on things your body is not capable of handling. And so you do have to be careful. The longevity research and longevity area has a substantial amount of fraud in it. And you might remember that Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, who died of cancer, admitted towards the end of his life that he was mistakenly went into alternative medicine as opposed to addressing the problem early on, which could have been corrected. They discovered the pancreatic cancer fairly early on in his life, but he didn't want to go through any of the treatments. He decided to go to Mexico for alternative medicine, and he died as a result and realized that. Not saying that all alternative medicine is bad. I'm just saying there's a lot of it out there that is fraudulent, and so you do have to be careful because people will take advantage of you, particularly as you get older. So being aware of what works and what doesn't work, being informed, and not living on the internet and just simply looking for what it is you want to see is one of the ways you can extend your life and not do things, pay for things that are actually going to shorten that life. The big aspect of this going forward, because we clearly are now kind of on a negative trend with regard to life extension in many areas where life expectancy is going down for once, which is problematic. Some of that's due to climate change. Some of that's due to increased conflict. A lot of it's due to really bad practices with regard to diet and exercise that have flown through much of the developed world. And given your life is yours, the more you do to understand the risks that you are taking and to mitigating those risks, so you aren't intentionally shortening the happiness, at least the ease of use or the mobility of life, would be important to at least extending your that mobility and your health. So this is something that's worth staying up on. It's kind of surprising to me that so many of the things that I was taught in high school have been dropped as educational sources. Things like how to plan a meal, how to have a balanced diet, even how to prepare your own food, aren't things that are regularly taught in school anymore. And so we have an awful lot of adults that are coming to the market that really don't know anything about nutrition and health, and thus are both vulnerable to scams and are doing themselves a great deal of harm as a result. So if you want a long life and you want that long life to be happy and mobile, it is worthwhile to take the time and learn about a diet, learn about exercise, learn about those things you can do to extend your life, extend the productive portion of your life longer, so you don't end up as many do as they get older, really unhappy, not very mobile, and wishing that they'd taken better care of themselves while they're younger. It's one of the sad aspects about the way we age is that when we're young and should be taking care of our life, we believe we're immortal and don't need to. And when we're old and are really interested in extending our lives, it's too late to do those things in many cases. And we can't make the changes that otherwise we might have made had we been younger to make the differences we want as we're older. So from an old guy to many of you that are quite a bit younger, take care of yourself well when you're young, and you'll have a far better life. even if it's not substantially longer.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Mr. Jason, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Yes, and thank you, Sharif and Rob and everyone. Yeah, definitely think that was well said. And yeah, I mean, just to like kind of expand a little bit on what Rob was saying, in my concluding remarks. I mean, here in the U.S., I mean, unfortunately, we're not seeing a very healthy population. We're looking at probably about 38% of obesity, and that's a big number. That's a massive number of obese people in the U.S. and obesity in general too. I feel like this is a new thing for our civilization, because when we evolved, food was so scarce that you probably just didn't have that happening. I mean, maybe it could have been possible, but a lot of the time you would catch a few fish and you would find some berries in a bush, and that would be it. And the rest of the time you'd be in this autophagy state where the body was essentially becoming more efficient and clearing itself out and cleaning itself. So it's possible that these people, even in historical times, were actually healthier in that regard than we're seeing today. So, just to echo that again, I mean, yeah, I think that unfortunately we're not really seeing a very healthy population, and to confound that too. I mean, to add on to that, to compound that, there's so much information that's kind of hard to even decipher nowadays. So like, there's so many diets, there's so many opinions, there's there is some fraud, there's some people misleading, and a lot of time we just don't know. I mean, we know much less in longevity and aging than we need to know. I mean, we're still at the tip of the iceberg understanding why we age, and so it's really hard to even make decisions for yourself and for your health. But that being said, we do know enough to change our actions in real time. We do know enough to determine that, okay, exercising is good, fasting, eating healthy vegetables, those types of things. But the discoveries now are coming out so quickly that for the average person, or really, to be honest, for everyone, it's over their heads. You're seeing discoveries happening at paces that just never have occurred in the past because of this digital transformation. We got groups all over the world now collaborating, PhD level papers coming out 24/7, experiments, happening around the clock. And it's really daunting for especially for the average individual. They're probably looking at all this info like, I have no clue what to even do. So that's one of that's one out of many of the motivations to actually launch Ageless Partners, is to try to help people to kind of decipher some of this information and try to make a determination on how to empower themselves, how to understand it a little more to make a better decision. But obviously, like, having that foundation, of exercise and sleep, a lot of people aren't even doing that. So it's hard to say for people to do anything more sophisticated, like a gene therapy, when they're not, doing the basics. But I think that what people really want is to be able to have all those vices, but still be very healthy, right? People want to smoke, people want to drink, people want to eat those cheeseburgers. So I think we will get to the point where our technology is so good that you can actually do whatever you want and still be healthy. But unfortunately, we're a long way from there, and unless we really alter, I'm saying that everything's happening so quickly, but let's be honest, it's not happening quick enough. Unless we have more people coming into this space, more capital, more minds, and really a perception shift, especially here in the U.S., unfortunately, we're going to see many more lives lost, and we may think that everything's going to be great, and we're all going to have these technologies, but really it's a tough problem. It's a very tough problem, and we really need all hands on deck. We need more researchers, because I think from a financial standpoint and economic standpoint, longevity and age reversal, it is going to be the biggest. What I believe is going to be one of the biggest fields on the planet, actually, because there's such a demand. Every single person on the planet is experiencing these effects of aging. So when we look at what's going to occur, if you could expand the health span, right, the healthy years of all the people in the U.S., just 1 year, we're looking at around a $38 trillion benefit, right, for from an economic standpoint. And Andrew J. Scott, I've talked about his paper before. He lays that out, and that's 380 trillion in 10 years. So we're looking at the biggest financial disruptor because of the fact that you got more people in the workforce, you got less healthcare costs, you got less caregivers. You're going to have all these synergies, and those people are going to be working longer, and they're going to be more motivated. But that's, of course, assuming we could do that. So it's a complex thing. I think that we're going to get there, but unfortunately, we're not going to get there at the speed that that's necessary for many people. And I hope that everyone when listening can help us bring it quicker, so those people can have a chance. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jason. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Thank you. Yeah, as been said, we should try to master the art of enjoying life, so that when people do radically increase their lifespan, there will just be more to enjoy. Because right now, extending lifespan could just increase the likelihood of falling into despondency. So I remember when I first got into like transhumanism via Ray Kurzweil and his books about living long enough to live forever. I have quite bad OCD sometimes, so I tried his dietary and supplement guidelines too excessively, and I developed an eating disorder, which we now call orthorexia, similar to anorexia. Orthorexia, which is a fear of consuming anything unhealthy, and I became very underweight, and it was not a fun chapter in my life. I was only about 14, 16, roundabout. It's a bit of a personal anecdote, but I will always remember that time and the lesson I learned about not punishing myself and enjoying what humans were made to enjoy. I am all for life extension. I certainly don't want to die. Death is still a great unknown, and I hope there isn't a nasty surprise waiting for me or for any of us on the other side, so to speak. So, of course, death is very anxiety-inducing, and nor do I want my loved ones to die either. They're not. My family aren't so bothered about life extension like I am. But yeah, we should not forget to enjoy life, so that if one is old and life extension still hasn't found the answer yet, then one can still look back as a 70, 80, 90-year-old back on their life and conclude that they had a good, fulfilling, meaningful, and enjoyable life well lived. Thank you.
Thank you. This is excellent discussion, especially for our audience, those who come from developing nations. And through this process, we can engage with this longevity research. Our community can do more collaborations for longevity research. Those who want to collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum to engage with developing nations, I want to welcome you all. Tomorrow, we have very special day. We have a special episode with Energy Ministry of Bangladesh, as well as some of the brilliant mind from Prime Minister Office of Bangladesh. They will join in World Talent Economy Forum. Beside that, I already sent invitation to all of our speakers. If you have time, you can join. We are actually trying to engage with more developing nations. We want to uplift these developing nations with modern science, engineering, and technology. We need more of your support, more support from developed worlds, more collaborations and partnership. Through this process, we can minimize the world, and we can make a really great global community. That is our objective. Thank you, Professor David Smith, Mr. Jason, and Mr. Adam for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agencies, with your corporations, and with your academy. And hopefully, how we growing, it will be really meaningful contribution for this world. Today in offline, we make the decisions in Malaysia after 1 year, just after 1 year, because we need a lot of preparations. We will invite you all in Malaysia for Talent Economy Conference. And I can assure you, many developing nations Prime Minister Office, lot of scientists, academic persons, largest corporation will join. And when the developed nations will support these projects, hopefully it will be more effective and more efficient. Thank you, Professor David Smith, and thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you.